Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Space Engineers Plus Me, episode 54. I'm Enigmius, and today we're looking at aesthetic building, part 2. Got all kinds of different shapes and things to look at. Mostly just kind of looking at shapes is really what it boils down to. We did an episode on the basics, the very basics of aesthetic building that was kind of focused around using the 22.5 degree slopes to make things a little bit more refined, a little bit less kind of chunky looking, which is really kind of a beginner sort of look at things when we're building. Is just kind of, we've got more than 45 degree angles and 90 degree angles. It's a good idea to take a look at what they are, but then you have the other option of taking a look at how some of these different things can fit together in ways that maybe a person wouldn't think about necessarily. One of the questions that came up was how I did the relief work on the Atlas. We've got sort of strips of yellow that are recessed deeper in the chassis than the orange that's all around them. And sometimes they would be curious to see how we did that. It's actually really straightforward and simple. We've got the 22.5 degree blocks, the 2x1s here. And what I've done throughout all of this, you've probably already noticed, is we've got two different colors going just so that you can see where one block ends and the other one begins, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell. That's the only reason for the different alternating colors, is to delineate those. But you've got these two kinds of blocks, and when you're placing them, how you set them up relative to one another can kind of make the difference between something that's really interesting and something that's really just a big flat panel. You can see over here, if we come over this way, we've got the thick block, and then we've got one of the thinner ones up on top, and we've got a couple of just cubes in behind, just for reference, because we're going to be then taking one of the thin ones and we're going to put it down one. So it's going to be offset one from these guys here. It's going to be down one, and then beside it we've got another thick one and then another thin one. And then the important thing is, in order to keep this going, where we've got... Oh, you stop it. I'm just standing here and she's complaining that the energy is low. We've got the two cubes here. Well, when we transfer it over this way, we end up with a cube, which we've completed the welding here, and then one of the thick slope blocks, 2x1 slope blocks in behind. So that continues the recess, and then if we wanted to keep it going, we would use one of the thick slope blocks here and one here, and then here we would use a thin one, and then we would have a cube in behind that thin one. We'd have a thick block on top, and it just goes on and on as far as you want to take it. And that's how we did the recessing there, is basically just kind of following things along. The yellow blocks are recessed, they're inset a little bit, and usually one block offset from the orange ones, and that's how we get that half block sort of step in. And if we actually stop and weld this up, hopefully the computer won't harass us about our low suit energy. You can see what we're talking about. We've got that half block recess like that, and in this case we've got kind of a light orange or a orangish yellow, and then the orange going on down the middle. And that's basically the alpha and the omega of the whole idea of recessing blocks like that. And in a game like this where you're building spaceships, there's lots of opportunities to use that kind of shape and that kind of detail to make things look a little bit more interesting, a little bit more space-like. So then you've got these blocks down here, and I placed these for a specific reason. These are the 22.5 degree blocks that are also set on a 45 degree angle, so you can do some really interesting angled stuff with them. And the tendency is to line them all up, as you see here, and then we would take one of these blocks and place it here, and another one of these little wee tiny ones and place it here, and then do the same thing up top and over there, and you end up with like a 45 degree slope that's also in a 22.5 degree slope. It can make for some really interesting designs, but it's also easy to get stuck in that way of looking at things, is just lining everything up the way it's supposed to be lined up so that we can get these nice angles and shapes. But sometimes you could do interesting things without necessarily following that route. I think the jetpack will be better than just walking around on it this time. Just again, by offsetting it one block, or whatever it takes in any particular direction, you can experiment with these kinds of things. So now you've got sort of one level here, and then it looks like you've built up on top of that something that's completely different. It completely, you could have a completely different section of the ship, and it's got this nice little strip in between that kind of delineates the two. And again, it's just a simple offset. It's moving a block one direction, one space from where you would put it if you were lining everything up so that you would get that smooth angle. So again, just very, very simple tricks and tips that you can use by way of offsets to create something that's, the thing about it is when we say it's interesting, some people are like, yeah, that's not interesting. But if you like it and you want to use it, then you use it. And if it's interesting to you, then it's good. And that's what it is. If you see it and you don't like it, then you know what not to do in your own builds. And we've done some of the experimenting for you, because one of the things that I've done in the past, and very regularly, is I sit down with a platform or something just like this and I build stuff. And I see what the different shapes are available, and I see what I can do with them, and I try and put them together in weird different combinations to see what I can come up with. A lot of the time it looks like crap, and a lot of the time I kind of just get rid of it and never do it again. Sometimes I find something that I really like, and it provides an opportunity to expand on my repertoire of different things that I can put onto different ships to make them look a little bit different from previous ships and to make them look a little bit more interesting than previous ships. One of the things that I don't see used very often with Space Engineers is the rounded blocks. There aren't a lot of them. It's kind of one of the problems, and there are fewer options to intersect with them cleanly in a way that looks good. You're basically given the option of kind of rounding off strips and sections, but you can't do much with angles, you can't do much with other things. But that doesn't mean that we're just limited to kind of putting together shapes that resemble penises, because that's kind of actually, you know what, lately the ones that I've been seeing, the penis builds, they aren't even this good. They don't use the rounded ones, they just use 45-degree angles. So that tells you something. Penis makers out there, up your game. But you get the idea. Just playing around and putting these down and seeing how they look and getting an idea of what might intersect with them and what doesn't. Easy way to learn. Quick and easy, cheap on materials. As long as you've got oxygen and hydrogen to keep yourself going, you can mess around to your heart's content, and it doesn't take much. And you can see over here, this is the third rounded block, because it's basically like a three-way intersection for the rounded sections, and then also 3 square sections that you can put together on the underside if you wanted. It's kind of tough to see, because you can see, there it is. It's squared off on the underside, and it's squared off on the 2 rear sides relative to where we are now. So you have the opportunity to connect things together to the square blocks and also to the circular or quarter circle blocks. And you can take some of these guys here, the individual quarter circles, you put them together to make a circle, and you got all kinds of domes here. You could put them together to make balls. It's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. It's already happened, and it's not going to stop happening, so we might as well just acknowledge it. But then there are these blocks here, which are kind of angled. They're not round, and they're not the simple 22.5 or 45 degrees, but straight. They're kind of angled blocks that we have to work with, and these have even fewer options for kind of connecting with other blocks in a way that looks good and makes sense. But they're there, and to sit down with them and mess around with them for a little bit, something I haven't given myself an opportunity to do, because I just looked at them and thought, that's not a priority. I would, honestly, looking at them, I would say that if I was going to use them for something, it would be in the place of a 45-degree slope, just to make things look a little more interesting. If it was just one row of 45-degree slopes that I was using, it would kind of fill things out a little bit and give us a different kind of line. That's definitely an option, and one that we might see in a build in the not horribly distant future. But realistically, I found that this is the hardest one to kind of wrap your head around and come up with interesting things to use it with, just because it's so limited in how it interacts with other blocks. Then we come over here, and you can see what I'm talking about. If you had a 45-degree slope like that, and you replace it with one of these guys, it just got a little bit more interesting. Maybe not necessarily better, but there's more going on than just a simple 45-degree slope. And then the other option on the other side, of course, is you could do the rounded thing as an alternative to a 45-degree slope. And then you could take the 22.5-degree slopes and the rounded circle bits, and you could come up with some sort of like a pie wedge shape thing. And of course, the big heart. It was unavoidable. As I was messing around and setting things up, I realized, yeah, you can make a heart shape sort of thing out of it. It's not the best heart in the world, and certainly not the best color selection for a heart, but it is a heart. Now, what I'm basically trying to get at here is encouraging people to just kind of sit down if they're feeling like they're a little bit stuck in terms of what they're building and how, is just sit down with these different kinds of blocks, try the round ones, try the compound angle ones, try the 22.5-degree slopes, try them all the way they fit together logically, and then try fitting them together in ways that they don't fit together logically and see what you can come up with. That, to me, is one of the easiest ways to kind of develop a repertoire of things that you can put together on ships to make them look a little bit different. And that's really what it comes down to. It's a process. It's not something where people sign into the game and they know exactly what they're doing with everything and they go and they just build stuff and it's always awesome. It's the people who sit around and they mess around. A lot of times they use other ships as reference, and that kind of gives them ideas in terms of thinking of ways to put things together that you may not have thought of. That's an excellent way to do things. And then there's just goofing around and having fun and not having to worry about coming up with a finished product that you're happy with, because you're not even aiming for a finished ship. You're just goofing around with different shapes and different sizes. So that's it. Pretty quick, simple look at a number of different options that you might have available to you. We're hard at work getting the Atlas done, and this was a good opportunity to kind of take a look at these things, because we're again in one of those places where we're making progress, but it's not really the kind of progress that's worth doing an episode on. The Atlas is sitting over there waiting on the track ship and the drill ship to be basically completed and tested and vetted and happy and all those other things. And then we're going to move them over here. We're going to test the gantries one last time, get everything else set up and dialed in, and then we're going to be off to Mars. But it's looking like before we do any of that, we're going to have to go back to the moon. So we're going to have to borrow some thruster components from the Atlas and put them on the Spectre Omni. We're going to go get some more platinum. Then we're going to come back and we're going to finish making all the thrusters that we need. I realized all of the stuff that we've been doing over here with the track ship and with the drill ship, we'd all been doing it with atmospheric thrusters, which isn't necessarily as utilitarian as I might like. So we're removing all the atmospheric thrusters and replacing them with ion thrusters. Understanding in atmosphere they won't be as effective, but we aren't looking for, things to carry a ship around and fly it around. We're looking at things to assist a ship that's being suspended from a gantry. So hopefully we'll be able to get it all sorted. So we're off to get platinum, and then we're going to finish the stuff and we're going to test it, and then we're going to put it over here and we're going to finish the other stuff and we're going to test it, and then we'll be off to Mars. If you want to be notified when I add that and other videos in the series, you can always subscribe to my channel and or follow me on social media. Links for social media are in the information box below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.
Energy low.